Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have all of you here at the Carnegie Endowment this afternoon. I'm actually Dennis. I'm a senior associate here at the Endowment. And it's a very special pleasure for us to welcome Rahul Pandit to the Endowment this afternoon to discuss his book, but using his book really as a launching point for what I hope will be a larger discussion about Kashmir. Rahul is a best-selling author and an award-winning journalist. He received the 2010 International Red Cross Award for conflict journalism and has reported on many hotspots around the world, ranging from Iraq to Sri Lanka, from the front lines. The book that he's going to draw on to talk to us this afternoon is called Our Moon Has Blood Clots. And it's an effort to relate the pain that Kashmir has suffered now for several decades from the viewpoint of the Kashmiri Pandit experience. The Kashmiri Pandits, as you all know, represented the minority in Kashmir until their forced eviction, actually early in the most recent round of the crisis. This process has, of course, been tragic for many reasons, but perhaps the most important of which is that it has ended up destroying what was a very composite and cosmopolitan culture that the state had enjoyed for 60 years. And so what Rahul will do today is spend about 30 minutes just walking us through some of the themes that have characterized the experience of the Pandit community, so that you get a feel for the complexity of the problems that the state has gone through in the last several decades. Without further ado, let me welcome you, Rahul, to the Endowment, and let me inflict you on these people who have come here this afternoon to listen to you. Thank you, Rahul.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a real honor and privilege to be speaking here in front of you, and I thank my friends at the Carnegie Center, Dr. Ashley Tellis in particular, for giving me this opportunity. Now, I'm not here to speak to you as an expert or as a specialist, because that is not what I am. I speak to you as a traveler who has learned the most valuable lessons of his life while traveling through various theaters of war. I've traveled for weeks with Maoist guerrillas in Central and East India, through villages where people are so resigned to fate that they think hunger is a disease. I've met men and women who went to some of India's best schools and are today running a radical insurgent group, which the Indian Prime Minister has recently termed as India's biggest internal security threat. I've been at the site of a bomb blast that killed so many, and I was so close to it that I could actually taste explosive powder on my lips. I've been a journalist for 17 years, and not a single day goes when you're out there in the field and you do not learn a new experience, you do not learn a new lesson. I'll tell you a small story about one of my experiences, life-altering experiences in Jordan and Iraq, where I went as a young journalist in the March of 2003 when the Iraq war was on. So there were about 2,500 of us journalists from all over the world who were stuck in Jordan, Amman, in the capital, because the borders were sealed and we didn't have a visa to enter into Iraq. And we were desperately looking for an opportunity to enter into Iraq. Now we would do whatever little reporting we could do from Amman, which was essentially that many refugees from Iraq would enter into Amman and we would speak to them. Jordan also has a very significant Palestinian population, so they would protest every now and then and we would cover those protests. But there was a lot of time to while away because there was not much to do. So in this process I met this young driver of Palestinian origin. His name was Muhammad. And in due course of time, we became friends, and he would ferry us every day from our hotel to different locations where we would cover small events here and there. And one day, while I was in his taxi, and he used to sing this really silly sing-song ditty, which in Arabic went something like this: "Bosh bosh shili dak hadal hachi mai fidak." He would speak in broken English, so one day I asked him what this meant. So he translated it for me, and he said, "This means, Mr. Bush, don't put your hands into Iraq, you will burn your hands." So I said, "All right." So one day, we got this small opportunity where a friend of mine who came from some other country, she bribed a couple of Jordanian officials, border officials, and they said, "Okay, we'll let you cross through the border, but what happens to you in Iraq is really none of our business. It is your business." I said, "Fine." So they made us sign an undertaking that the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan is not responsible for our safety. And sure, the three of us, me, my journalist friend, and another journalist, we crossed over this small 200-meter, 300-meter no man's land. And we land at this border called Al-Karama, where there's this giant statue of Saddam Hussein really in front of us. And the moment we reach there, we are surrounded by the Republican guards who are wearing their loose coats and they are heavily armed. Now, one has picked up a couple of Arabic phrases and words in Jordan to communicate with people, and I say to them, Sahafi, which in Arabic or Urdu means a journalist. And they say passport. So we show them our passports. Obviously there are no visas, and suddenly the chief of this small unit, he gets very hostile, and he's shouting what I thought were expletives in Arabic. And suddenly we're surrounded, and the people, the men, they start cocking their AK-47 rifles, and I think to myself, oh God, we're dead. And I look at this journalist friend of mine, the whole blood is drained out of her face, and it has come to her ears, and they are pulsating like that of a rabbit's. And all of a sudden, which in hindsight I think was some kind of divine intervention, I started singing this silly sing-song ditty in front of them. Bosh, bosh, shili da khadal hachi mai fida. So the first response was that the barrels came down, and the chief caught hold of his stomach and started rolling on the road with laughter. So in the next few minutes, these people made me sing this ditty about 50 times. After which I was so frustrated that I thought to myself, okay, if he asks me to sing this again, I'll say, "Sir, just put a bullet through my head, I'll be fine." Of course, they did not let us enter into Iraqi territory. 3 days later, we did manage to enter when we got another opportunity, but that's another story. But when I came back from Iraq after this assignment, I realized I was so stressed that I'd forgotten the PIN number of my bank ATM card. Now, this may not be a big deal for many of you, but it is really a big deal for someone like me, who has a John Nash kind of fascination with numbers. I remember the waterworks connection number given by the state government about 23 years ago at a home, which I had at one point of time in Kashmiri Valley. It was 44732. I have friends in New Delhi who are very successful journalists, and they report for various publications, top publications of India. Now they are very highly successful journalists who understand the meaning of phrases like inclusive growth and trillion-dollar economy. And they often ask me why I put myself through such events, why I go to such God-forsaken place. And I can't tell them that my empathy for such people in conflict zones comes from my own homelessness, my own uprootedness. The home whose water connection I remember is the only home I have, and that home, ladies and gentlemen, was in Kashmiri Valley. The home is still there, but it is occupied by someone else. It no longer belongs to me. We were forced out of our home on the morning of April 4, 1990. Now, my parents have never been back to Kashmir after that day. but I go there regularly as a journalist. But often I avoid traveling in the general direction where my home is. Now I'm in exile for 23 years and my entire community is in exile. So today, through this opportunity, I'm going to share that story with you, and I'll tell you why it is the duty of all of us sitting here to ensure that this exile breaks and that I return to my homeland. I'm a Kashmiri Pandit. We are a small community that is a religious minority in Kashmir. We are everywhere, and no matter where we go, we work hard. We may not have enough to eat, but we make sure that our children go to school. We may live under a tin shed, but we make sure that we have books. These are tough times for us, so I'm not sure whether we have the audacity of hope, but we surely do have the audacity of perseverance. My ancestors have lived in Kashmir Valley for thousands of years, and they've spent their lives in pursuit of knowledge. It is they who took Buddhism to central Tibet, painting some really magnificent murals all the way from Kashmir to Tibet. It is one of them who translated the Buddhist Lotus Sutra into Chinese. The Guru Padmasambhava, or Rinpoche, we also call him the second Buddha, he spent a considerable time of his life in Kashmir, drinking from its knowledge reservoir. My 12th century ancestor, Kalhana, wrote the magnum opus Rajtarangani, which is considered as world's most extraordinary historical work. India's first Prime Minister was a Kashmiri Pandit. Now some of my fellow community members are here in the United States. They are space scientists, professors, doctors, entrepreneurs. I would like to particularly mention the name of Mr. Neil Kashkari, who's worked with both the Republicans and the Democrats to help America tide over some serious economic challenges. But before I begin talking to you about one particular night in January 1990 in Kashmir Valley, I'll tell you one story which will make you understand why this story, the story of Kashmiri Pandits, is relevant today. In 1999, an Indian Airlines flight, IC-814, was hijacked by terrorists from India and forced to land in Kandahar, Afghanistan. That was then under the control of the Taliban. Now, the government of India chose to negotiate with the terrorists and agreed to release 3 terrorists in exchange of these hostages. One of them, these 3 terrorists, was a man called Masood Azhar, who was the founder of the terrorist group Jaish-e-Mohammed, and he was arrested from Kashmir earlier. The second one was a Kashmiri terrorist called Mushtaq Zargar, who is responsible for the killing of many innocent Kashmiris, including Kashmiri Pandits. The third one was a man who loved to play chess and indulge in arms wrestling. Now, he had been arrested in a Delhi suburb earlier, where he had kidnapped some foreign tourists, and the local police in Delhi stumbled upon him while they were investigating a case of cycle theft. This person was a man called Umar Sheikh. Now, 2 years later, after he was released, as the US investigations later revealed, he's the person who wired about $100,000 to a man called Muhammad Atta. Now, I don't think I need to tell anyone among the audience who Muhammad Atta was. A year later, after this episode, it is this man who planned the abduction and the subsequent beheading of my fellow journalist, Daniel Pearl. These 3 men, ladies and gentlemen, are among the people who are responsible for my homelessness. These are the same people who rammed that aircraft into the World Trade Center. These are the same people who appear on YouTube every now and then, declaring a jihad against the United States of America. They are the same people who send their mercenaries to the Jewish Center in Mumbai and like to hear on the phone the sound of people being shot. And that is why I must take you to the Kashmir of 80s, where I was born. This is the Kashmir where there was a coffee house called the India Coffee House, where writers, intellectuals, poets, they would all meet. There was a man my father knew, his name was Jawahar, but he was too much into the works of the philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre. And he was so popular that he was nicknamed Sartre. we had, all these people would sit there, have coffee and discuss existentialism. We had in Kashmir these floating boats, which we called houseboats, and foreign tourists would come and stay in these boats, named after their foreign patrons, Alicia, Catherine, Rosalind. Kashmir also happened to be the favorite destination of George Harrison, the lead guitarist of Beatles. I recently stumbled upon a photo shoot done in the 60s by this really nice fashion magazine called Vogue. I've never seen it before. That was done on the banks of Dal Lake in Kashmir in the 60s. We had movie halls where one could watch films like The Guns of Navarone or a James Bond flick like The Spy Who Loved Me. Today, that coffee house does not exist. It was closed after a bomb blast shattered it in the autumn of 1989. There are no movie halls either, and those who were nicknamed Satr are into exile. It all began for us in the autumn of 1989 for the first time when we heard murmurs that a few men had crossed over to Pakistan for arms training. Now we were a small community and we lived together for decades, and we dismissed it. Once in a while, every now and then, we face some kind of unpleasant situation, a communal riot in some part of the valley. And as a religious minority in Kashmir, we would act like a submarine, we would lower our heads and hope that this situation passes soon. But by January 1990, our worst fears had come true. There were guns in Kashmir now. And very soon we realized that these guns were there to target our community. So in September 1989, one of our prominent Kashmiri Pandit leaders steps out of his house and is gunned down immediately. A High Court judge, retired High Court judge, is accosted on the road, waylaid on the road, and shot dead. We were getting these signals also apart from these select targeted killings. One day my mother, who was with the state health department, she was in a bus coming back from her house, and there was this man in the bus who helped an old Pandit lady get down from the bus. And others in the bus lashed at him and they said, "Why are you helping this old Pandit lady in getting out of the bus?" And around this time we also noticed that some of us would be renovating our houses, and our people around us with whom we interacted on a daily basis. Our colleagues, our neighbors, our friends, even the local milkman, they would come to our house and say, "Oh, why are you wasting time on this renovation? Tomorrow, or maybe day after tomorrow, this house will belong to us." And ultimately that is what happened. And these houses were taken away from us on the night of January 19, 1990. I believe in the United States, people often ask each other, "Where were you when Kennedy was shot?" I think the Pandit equivalent of that would be, "Where were you on the night of 19th January 1990? In January 1990, there were 75,000 Pandit families in Kashmir, constituting about 350,000 or maybe 400,000 people. That is less than 5% of the valley's population. It is in the same month, in January 1990, that a Harvard graduate made a very passionate speech in Islamabad. Her name was Benazir Bhutto. She said that the Kashmiris had the blood of the Mujahideen flowing through their veins. She also invoked the Ghazis. Ghazis in Arabic is the destroyer of infidels. So she invoked the Ghazis to fight a jihad in Kashmir. Now in January 1990, of course, she had no idea that the same Ghazis would devour her 17 years later. It is in mid-January that we watched in horror some visuals coming to us on state television from Baku in Azerbaijan of the Christian Armenian population that was beaten up, tortured, raped and expelled. But in Kashmir in January 1990, before the night of 19th January 1990, we were still hopeful. We thought this too shall pass, as it has in the past. But then it did not pass. And that is how, for most of us, the night of 19th January 1990 is the longest night of our lives. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very aware and respectful of a sense of proportion, and it will be really unequal for me to compare our Exodus with the Jewish Holocaust. But let me take a minute or two to describe to you the events of 19 January 1990 and how it became our personal kristallnacht. My family lived in this suburb in the summer capital, Srinagar. It was a small neighborhood comprising of about 20 Pandit households, and there were other localities around. In January, Kashmir goes through a very harsh winter spell, and there would hardly be anyone on the roads after late evening. And my family, like most of us, retired on the evening of 19th January 1990 after dinner. I was very young at that point of time. I was just 14. And I just slept, and after a point of time, I heard these noises coming from the street below. And I was startled when my father woke me up, and then I realized that this is not something I'm dreaming. These noises are really coming from the street below. Now, we were very used to the sound of the prayers coming from the mosque, from the loudspeaker, because we have lived there for decades. But on this night, these loudspeakers were not used for regular prayers. These loudspeakers were used to intimidate us when they started shouting slogans against us from these mosques. Some of these slogans, they really scared us that night. One of them in Kashmiri went, Batanun Byol Padain Gol, which essentially means that the seed of the Kashmiri Pandits has been destroyed by the Almighty God. The other slogan that they used against us extensively, which went into Kashmiri something like this, Asigats Panni Pakistan, Batav Rusti Batansan, which essentially means that we want our Pakistan without Pandit men, but with their women. Now, obviously, this frightened us a lot. My mother, I remember, took out a knife, and my sister was elder to me. She was in college, and she said, if the mob comes tonight, I'll kill your sister, and then I'll kill myself. And then you men decide what needs to be done. The night passed somehow, and the next morning we realized that this is not something that has happened in our locality alone. The same thing has happened across Kashmir Valley, in every street, in every neighborhood, in every locality, in every district, in every village. In other places, stones have been pelted at Kashmiri Pandit houses. At some places, mobs had come out carrying petrol cans, threatening to burn down Pandit houses. Now, this is a time in 1990 when there was no social media network around. There was no Facebook or Twitter to mobilize people. There were no mobile phones. Even the basic telephony, the basic landline density in Kashmir was very low. Now, I've spoken about this at many forums recently after my book was out in January this year. And many friends come to me after such a conversation, after such a talk, and they say, how did it feel on the night of 19th January 1990? Till recently, I've had no answer till I read this brilliant graphic novel done by this artist called Art Spiegelman. It's a graphic novel called Mouse, where he interviews his father, who's a Holocaust survivor, and he asks him how it felt to be living under the Nazi regime. And his father startles him by producing a loud boo and says it felt like that, but always. So that is how it felt for us to be there in Kashmir Valley on the night of 19th January 1990. The exodus of our community really began from next year onwards, from 20th January 1990. There was absolutely no administration in sight. The Indian state had collapsed completely. There was no army, no paramilitary forces, nobody came to our rescue. On the roads, processions of hundreds of thousands of people would come out, shouting slogans against us, showing us their fists. The slogan mongering kept on coming as well. At several places, old Pandit men and women were forced to lead such processions. At some places, candy and coins was thrown at us. Now, this is a local culture which is done when a dead person is being taken for his or her last rites. So this candy or coins were thrown at us to signify to us that we were already dead. Now, in the next few months, hundreds of Kashmiri Pandits were killed, some of them in extremely brutal fashion. Doctors, professors, teachers, nurses, shopkeepers, writers, unemployed, housewives, even pregnant women were not spared. The idea behind this massacre, these killings, was kill one and kill him or her in such a fashion that it scares thousands into exile. Now I want to share a couple of examples with you about what happened in 1990 and how brutally some of us were done to death. In downtown Srinagar, in the old part of Srinagar, there used to live this young telecommunication engineer. He was just 37. His name was B.K. Ganju. In the March of 1990, he was at his house in the morning when 3 terrorists, armed terrorists, came to his house to eliminate him. Now he raced on to the 3rd floor of his house, which we use as an attic to store winter supplies in Kashmir. And he hid himself in a rice drum. Now the 3 terrorists kept looking for him. They searched for him through the house, but they could not find him, so they left. In the old part of Srinagar, the houses are very close to each other. Now, while as they were leaving, these 3 men were leaving, one of their neighbors, a woman, she had seen Mr. B.K. Ganju hiding in that rice drum, and she signaled to these three men the spot where this gentleman was hiding. So they returned, shot him dead in that rice drum, and forced his wife to eat the blood-soaked rice. In a remote area, one of the remote villages in North Kashmir, in Bandipora, a young laboratory assistant working in a school, Girja Tikku, she was abducted by her own colleagues and neighbors, blindfolded, gang raped in a moving car, and then cut alive on an electric saw. There were cases where police personnel connived with terrorists to kill Kashmiri Pandits. Some of us who were injured in shootouts with terrorists and were later admitted to hospital died in hospital because the doctors in hospitals back then refused to treat them. As a result, by October 1990, barring a handful of families, all of us been forced into exile. And it was so sudden, ladies and gentlemen, that it uprooted us completely. We left in whatever means of transport we could get. Of course, there were no United Nations trucks to ferry us to other parts of India. So we just kept on moving on our own in whatever transport we could get through these treacherous mountain passes. Our first goal was to somehow escape from Kashmir. Then we didn't realize, and we realize it now, and we realize it later, that we had become refugees in our own country. Most of us landed in Jammu city, and that summer was the most difficult summer of our lives. That is the first summer we had to spend in the dusty Indian plains in torn tents and one-room dwellings that were cowsheds earlier and were put on rent by enterprising landlords after painting them with cheap distemper for rent. Imagine a 70-year-old woman who has lived all her life in New England and is forced to live in Texas in a tent that does not even have a table fan. I remember back then in 1990, there was this old man my family knew. He used to live in one of these refugee camps. And he was found dead one day with a pack of chilled milk pressed against his right cheek to provide him support from the heat. Now this refugee camp was set on the outskirts of the Jammu city on a land infested with snakes and scorpions. So as a result, in the first year of exile itself, dozens of people died of sunstroke and snake and scorpion bites, and we suffered from so many ailments which were unknown to us before. Post-traumatic stress disorder, insomnia, stress-induced heart disease, hypertension, skin disease, and later we realized that some of our children in these refugee camps had also contracted high levels of lead poisoning because of unhygienic water supply. In these torn tents, of course, there was no privacy that led to a drop in fertility rates. Youngsters would delay marriage and prefer not having children. Even after 23 years of exile, we still have a high mortality rate and a very low birth rate that has plunged us into a negative growth rate. Nobody came to our rescue in all these years. The government of India did not care about us because we do not form a vote bank. The human rights groups in India did not care about us. They did not take cognizance of our plight because they have a very perverted idea of liberal discourse, plural discourse. The left liberals ignored us because it was not fashionable to talk about us. The international policy groups and NGOs and media only focused on state-specific human rights violation. For them, it was a black and white situation where there was one set of people who had been brutalized by the Indian state. But what they forgot to understand or choose to ignore, that the same set of people had brutalized another set of people who happened to be Kashmiri Pandits in this case. The idea of home is central to our existence. It is a universal appeal, you know. I believe in the United States of America also, it is a cherished dream for someone to own a house, to possess a house. And in context of Kashmir, it was indeed a special dream for us, because when we were growing in Kashmir in the 80s, or my father's generation, we did not have access to any stocks or bonds or money market funds. So any middle class family who had any kind of savings would put them into their house. Generations of Kashmiri Pandits spent their lives in rebuilding lives. I mentioned to you, the 1947, when the tribesmen attack happened, when Kashmir was attacked by these tribesmen from the northwestern frontier province, aided by Pakistani army regulars. And that point of time, my mother used to stay in this North Kashmir province of Baramulla, and they had a house which my grandfather, maternal grandfather, had very lovingly built. And as the tribesmen came, they burned down village after village, and my mother's house was burned down in the process, and they lost everything. So for the first time in 1947, they came to Srinagar, to the city from that province, and became refugees in their own state. Now in the 70s, my father and my mother built this house in a Srinagar suburb that was built by my father's retirement savings and my mother's bridal jewelry. Now that was also gone in 1990. But that is not all what has happened in Kashmir since we left. What has happened in Kashmir in our absence is extremely tragic. More than 600 of our temples, of our religious places, have been vandalized or destroyed. Some of them even date back to date before the Bamyan Buddhas. Initially in Kashmir, after we left, our houses were burned down. But then they realized that when these houses are being burned down, in some cases the Kashmiri Pandits also get insurance claims. So they started vandalizing it and looting away everything, including in many cases sanitary and electrical fittings. Many houses, even after 23 years, have been forcibly occupied. At several places, schools of the radical Jamaat-e-Islami have been opened in our erstwhile homes. In the last few years, we have witnessed a large-scale cultural effacement in Kashmir. Ancient names of places, our shrines have been changed to erase any signs of our existence there. The revenue records of temple lands and other shrines have been changed. Even the state government, in the name of public utility, has grabbed our land for widening roads or building fire stations. I also mentioned to you earlier that in 1990, when most of us left, some of the families chose to stay back. These families mostly come from a rural background, and they had no reference to context of a life anywhere else. Most of them had not traveled their entire lives beyond the 20-mile radius of their homes. So what happened to them after most of us left? In March 1997, in this small village, 7 Kashmiri Pandits lined outside their homes and shot dead. In 1998, in another sleepy hamlet, not very far from my father's village, 23 Kashmiri Pandits, this small cluster of Kashmiri Pandits, all wiped out, including 11 women, 2 children. On 23 March 2003, another 24 Pandits, this time in a village in South Kashmir, were killed, including 2 children, after making them sit in a common courtyard and shooting them all in the faces. In June 1997, a young professor was dragged out of the bus along with his 2 other Pandit colleagues and shot dead. His name was Ravinder, we used to call him Ravi. He was just 34 and had an 18-month-old son. Ravi was my brother. I was in Delhi when I received the news of his death. And the same night I took a bus to be with my family, who happened to live on the outskirts of the Jammu city. And when I was on the outskirts, I saw his photograph splashed on the front page of the newspapers. Now, in all these killings of hundreds of Kashmiri Pandits, there has not been a single conviction so far. I wish I could show you a video clip. Maybe I can share it with you later. This is about a terrorist called Farooq Ahmad, also called Bitta Karate, because apparently he used to practice karate. There's an interview of him, there's a video clipping of his interview he has given to a journalist way back in 1990, where he confesses on television that he was responsible for killing of more than 20 Kashmiri Pandits. He has spent a few years in jail, but after spending those years in jail, he was released on the bail. And the judge remarked, while releasing him on the bail, and I'm quoting the judgment, "The court is aware of the fact that the allegations leveled against the accused are of serious nature and carry a punishment of death sentence or life imprisonment, but the fact is that the prosecution has shown total disinterest in arguing the case." Now, I would be surprised if Farooq Ahmad lands up in the United States of America one day, as many of other terrorists from Kashmir have landed, or their sympathizers have landed in the United States of America or Western countries. We had a lot of faith in the Indian state, in the world's largest democracy. We had a lot of faith in the media and the Indian intelligentsia that claims to be rallying behind the rights of the minorities. But they only helped our murderers deny that a religious ethnic cleansing took place in Kashmir in 1990. Now, for some of us, the bigger betrayal, bigger than the exodus itself, is this state of extreme denial in the last 23 years about the circumstances that led to our exodus. And I'm reminded of this small story I read in the New York Times a few years ago, where there was this survivor of the Auschwitz camp. She goes back to her street in Austria after 3 years and meets one of her neighbors who just smiles at her, says, "Oh, I haven't seen you for a long time. Where have you been?" Now, this is exactly what is happening to us in Kashmir, where there's this extreme, complete denial that our own neighbors and friends took part in our brutalization. Now, every now and then, you will hear noises from the Indian government too, about the return of the Kashmiri Pandits. Oh yes, we are making every effort for the return of Kashmiri Pandits, but it seems as if we are victims of some earthquake or a flood. What they fail to understand is that we are victims of a man-made political disaster. We are victims of an ethnic cleansing in Kashmir in 1990. And that is, my friends, why we must understand the true nature of the militant groups operating in Kashmir Valley today. all of them are Wahhabi in nature. We have terrorists whose wives are running Islamist organizations that go about the city, cracking down on youngsters, surfing the internet in cyber cafes. We have terrorists and their sympathizers who insist that everyone in Kashmir should lead his or her life on the principles of Sharia. And that is why I appeal to all of you not to sit silent, ladies and gentlemen. The US government has cracked down recently on the Kashmiri separatist network here with the arrest of a person called Ghulam Nabi Fai. But that's surely not enough. Because even though the United States might be doing enough for cracking down on these jihadi groups, the Indian government for sure is not doing enough. Because I believe all these details of the jihadi network in US, which extends up to Kashmir, has been shared with the Indian government, but the Indian government has done nothing so far to crack down on these networks. It is not only about Kashmiri Pandits, it is also about these unsung Malalas in Kashmir Valley who became victims of these ultra-Islamist terrorist organizations. One only has to read the newspapers in Kashmir Valley every now and then to understand the radicalization that has destroyed Kashmir in its entirety. And the choice today is not to save the Kashmiri Pandits only. The choice is to save the international order, because all of us now know that the jihadi groups are no longer localized. So today, there might be a jihadi group who's planning something in Kashmir, and tomorrow, God forbid, it's the same jihadi organization that might be planning something else in the West or the United States of America. So it cannot be a gunman in case of a Boston bombing, and a terrorist in case of a Boston bombing, and an unidentified gunman in case of Kashmir. So the international community must understand that the Eastern Front of war or terror is in Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you, Rahul. The ancient Greeks used to say that there were two paths to truth. One is through philosophy, which we at the Carnegie Endowment usually dabbled in, or at least through the successes of philosophy. And the other was through poetry, because poetry managed to convey, in a very immediate sense, truths that rational analysis often has some difficulty in capturing. It was really wonderful to hear you speak today, because it was a really moving reflection on a tragedy which has been repeated in many ways the world over, in different communities, in different circumstances, and including in Kashmir itself. Your Muslim brethren in Kashmir have been as much victimized by extremists as the Pandits. And the tragedy that at the end of the day, it seems to me, is hard to imagine, is the dramatic change that has taken place in the character of the state. This used to be India's Switzerland many, many decades ago. It was seen as an area of tranquility and peace, and today it is anything but. So thank you for coming here and looking to us, giving us this sense in a way that many of our policy briefs, no matter how learned, would find it hard to capture. I'm going to open the floor if you wish to continue this conversation. Identify yourself and the institution so that Rahul knows who you are, and then I'll just call it on. Yes. This microphone.
Thank you very much. Great to have. From India Global Asia today. I have been traveling to India and almost every year to Kashmir, and met all those Hurriyat, 24 Hurriyat people also in their headquarters and also in United and paramilitary force. What I hear from the people there, people in common, they are very happy with India, what their life goes on. When I was there one time in Lal Chowk, I saw bombing, but after 15 minutes there was nothing, life was normal. Because this is every day, it's politicians from both sides. My question is that, do you believe that there is a shop opened by both sides of the border and they are making money in the name of Kashmir, number one. Number two, we always hear only Kashmir in India. We never hear from occupied Kashmir in Pakistan, or about that Kashmir, nothing. And recently, those Kashmiris in Pakistan, they stood against Pakistan for the first time, and they had demonstration in the White House and also at the Pakistan embassy. What they're saying is that they have much problem which world doesn't know, and Pakistan doesn't want to tell the world what they are going through. My question is again, why nobody is talking about that part of Kashmir, and what is the solution? What you just said, that this is the first time that maybe we are all hearing that side of the story, and even the government of India doesn't talk about it. So where do we go from here? Because every year prime ministers meet from Pakistan, India, and also I just came back from India last week, also came back. And went to Simla agreement where this round table was signed. I went to Simla also, that same building, and talked to the people there. And they're talking the same thing, that Simla took place in 1972 over there, but nothing is happening. Every year they meet the Prime Minister at the United Nations or in Delhi or Islamabad. So what is the future? People are suffering both sides. It's not only Pakistan or India, but both sides. Thank you.
Well, there are many questions you have put across. But yes, I think any right-thinking person in Kashmir Valley understands that he or she may have many legitimate grievances against the Indian state. But the future of the Kashmiris is better off with India than anywhere else. But in many cases, they cannot openly say it because everything is in a conflict zone is silenced in the name of the cause. But at the same time, as a journalist, I visit Kashmir Valley very often, almost 3-4 times a year at least. In the last few years, what has happened is, and what really scares me, is the radicalization of a significant portion of youngsters, especially from the rural areas of the old parts of Kashmir. And sometimes I travel with them. These are the people who throw stones at the Indian police, or throw an odd hand grenade sometimes. It is really scary, the way they deal with the question of death or violence. So that is one thing which really scares me, and of course there is a lot of anti-India sentiment in those quarters. So that we will have to deal with. But of course, you're right, both the governments have contributed significantly to the mess that Kashmir is in now, including the government of India. I think we are currently suffering, many years actually, policy paralysis as far as Kashmir are concerned. And in many ways, and it is true for many other conflict zones, Kashmir has now become this cottage industry where it is in everybody's interest, all the players, to make sure that this conflict is kept alive, because there's a lot of money coming in. You'll be surprised to know that Kashmir is the only market in the entire India which has never seen a property slum. I mean, you have seen a real estate slum in big cities like Delhi or Mumbai, but even during conflict, in these 23 years of terrible conflict, the property rates have never gone down in Kashmir, except perhaps the houses of Kashmiri Pandits. So there's a lot of money, and this money is not coming from Indians, because Indians cannot buy land there or those kind of things. So this money is generated internally, and a lot of this money has to do with money which is generated from this conflict, from the insurgency. So yes, you're right.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Samira Daniels. Thank you for your presentation. I'm glad you discussed the issue of exile, because so many people are in exile. I think the question I have specifically is, Do you see any, you're saying that, there's a general consensus or some, constituencies which see the prospect of Kashmir as an extension of India. Do you think that that is a viable option? And is it not compounded by the fact that both India and Pakistan, from the young Indians and Pakistanis that go abroad and then come back and report, and they're disgusted with the situation, just as Israeli young people go back and they don't want to have anything to do with their home countries. So I think it's a little bit more complicated, and I think that we're looking at this formation of a conflict that's actually going beyond simply identity beyond identity, and the younger people are removing themselves, and some of us have been talking about this, that we're not helping the situation if we make these sort of pat statements about, that have been traditionally been, spoken and repeated.
Well, going through more than 2 decades of conflict is not an easy task,
Yeah.
Especially when you're living in that place. So every day, the local Kashmiri population has to go through a lot of struggles. While dealing with the security forces, there's also this pressure from the terrorist groups, especially in rural areas. So people are getting disgusted of this endless cycle of violence. There are youngsters who, even among the majority Kashmiri people from the Muslim community, who are leaving Kashmir because they want to settle there, where they are sick and tired of this violence. In 2010, when Kashmir was going through this one particular cycle of violence, I had some of these young journalists call to me in the dead end of the night and say, please, for God's sake, I want to go from here, otherwise I'll commit suicide. So this violence gets onto you. But the question really is, as far as I'm concerned, today I speak here as a journalist, or as a journalist who also happens to be a Kashmiri Pandit. But in our case, it does not change anything. Now these people are tired of violence; they'll go elsewhere. But as far as our story is concerned, we face the same roadblock from everyone. So privately, 1 or 2 of your close friends might come to you and say that, okay, in 1990, terrible stuff has happened. But when it comes to a collective narrative, there's still an extreme denial. So as a journalist, I think now is the time to move on in terms of truth and reconciliation. That the both communities should move on and accept that this is what happened in 1990. But that reconciliation is not going to happen until there is a complete consensus on the circumstances that led to our exodus. And that consensus is still not there, because a majority of people in Kashmir, including the youngsters who you are talking about, are still in denial mode about Kashmiri Pandits. So that is not going to help at all.
Hello, I'm Jay Kansar with the Hindu American Foundation, and I want to say for 8 years now we have been speaking about the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits on Capitol Hill and with the State Department administration. So rest assured there is somebody speaking about your plight among other groups. My question is, either one of you could answer, but as Ashley is a senior State Department diplomat and you as someone who's experienced the plight. Former, excuse me. Former Ambassador Hussein Haqqani of Pakistan has publicly stated that the ISI was perpetrating this exodus and they were funneling the terrorists and weapons into Kashmir. Why has the United States failed to publicly chastise Pakistan for this aiding of an exodus of hundreds of thousands of people? And we bring this up as American citizens because we are sickened by it. So if you could shed any light on that, I would greatly appreciate it.
So that's your
How much time do you have? Well, I'll just say that it's not true. The U.S. has not leaned on Pakistan on this question. But I think the record clearly shows that we've been ineffective. And we've been ineffective because we have tried to pursue multiple goals with Pakistan that are sometimes at odds with one another. And it will not come as a surprise to you that when these multiple goals are in conflict, we have put all our weight on the goals that most immediately advance our interests, as opposed to the interests of the other participants in this conflict. This is an unfortunately bitter reality in international relations. And I don't think we are the only victims of this problem. Everybody else is just as limited in their choices because of this predicament. But I can tell you that certainly when I was in government, there were numerous instances when we went very clearly to our Pakistani colleagues and conveyed to them our extreme displeasure with what was happening. And I certainly saw this firsthand from 2001 to 2004. But many of these events that Rahul described today predated my coming to government. I mean, we're really talking of the early phase of the most recent insurrection.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Connor Arrington. I'm from the Organization of American States, but have a passion for the Kashmir issue. It sounds like, in having met several Pandits in my life, and not knowing too much, a little bit about the history, it sounds like there is a desperate need for, or search for justice. But having studied the Kashmir issue quite a great deal, it has grown more and more clear, at least in my mind, that the search for the Pandit justice also centers on a search for justice for the other Kashmiri, in particular the Muslims of the Kashmir Valley. So it seems to me, and I get worried a little bit, some of your rhetoric seems a little alarmist about the different terrorists coming to the States and stuff, but it seems like it would be more effective trying to combine those two narratives and trying to find justice for both, because if you're seeking justice separately, like you said, it's going to be difficult for people to recognize different circumstances when they also feel that their injustices and their tragedies have not been recognized.
Fair enough. But the only difference you see is that what the Kashmiri Muslims might be facing today is at the hands of the Indian state. And I'm not here as a representative of the Indian states, and I have no role as a Kashmiri Pandit to play in that suffering. So as far as the Kashmiri Pandit narrative is concerned, it is between them and us, because we have been victims of what was inflicted on us by the majority community in Kashmir. And when I say this story, I always say this, that one pain does not have to exist at the cost of the other pain. Both these pains can exist simultaneously. And as a journalist, I was doing a rough mathematics the other day. In the last 17 years, I have done about 250 stories from Kashmir Valley. Only 4 of them deal with the issue of Kashmiri Pandits. The rest of them have been from Kashmir Valley about various issues, including several human rights violations at the hands of the Indian state. But as far as the question of Kashmiri Pandits is concerned, the redressal will come later from the Indian government, but it has to begin from ground zero in Kashmir, from the community that brutalized us.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name's Allison Berlin Call, and I recently finished up a PhD studying Indian electoral politics and the BJP. But I'm married to a Kashmiri Pandit, and known the family for 9 years, and so a lot of what you've said would be right. I've heard these stories for the last 9 years, and some of the connections, the feeling connections with what happened in World War II. I've really heard that, and I have a comment and then a question. The comment is that it really strikes me from being with this community that there is a tremendous amount of psychological trauma that has been experienced, just a profound wrenching trauma. This is not the only group, but I really, that's something that I've taken away from, and I see it come out in various ways in the family. And my question is, and I don't know how off-base this is, but I've wondered, when I'm thinking about Kashmir and India and Pakistan, the degree to which this civilizational trauma colors the intractable nature of the conflict. And you've had thoughts about that. I've really been thinking a lot about this role of civilizational trauma, and Kashmir is almost the sort of the nub of that trauma. Thanks.
I'm not sure whether I understand the question, but
The question was how the conflict is linked to how the sense of trauma intensifies
The sort of intractable.
the intractability
Yeah,
of
the sort of psychological aspect, is it?
I mean, you can just take it for what it's worth. It doesn't, you don't have to answer if you.
no, I'm not sure I understand that, that's why.
I've just been thinking about the degree to which the conflict seems so intractable, and the degree to which trauma, and something like, it colors all ability to bring people to the table, to be able to listen, there's so many wounds on both sides. So many profound wounds that, you know, you can talk about getting to yes, and you can do all the sort of conflict resolution stuff out there. But if two people are really sitting there wounded and feeling like with this horrible pain, you know, how do you get it?
I get it now.
Okay.
I think in the history of conflicts, wherever there has been any kind of reconciliation, maybe South Africa or elsewhere, it has only happened when the two parties have come together and spoken about their trauma. I have been witness to some films and videos from some of these conflict zones where such a truth and reconciliation processes have taken place. And it is amazing to see how people narrate what happened to them on one particular night in Bosnia or Rwanda, even in Nepal or Sri Lanka. When I was writing this book and when this book came out, there were a few people in Kashmir and elsewhere who said that you've written a lot of stuff, you've written a lot of truth, but somehow this will become an impediment in the coming of two communities together because this is festered the wounds. To which I always say, that building cannot happen, that bridging the gap cannot happen at the cost of our story. So in the last 23 years, one kind of narrative has always come from Kashmir. And this is perhaps for the first time that our story has come out on such a large scale. So I think as a community, we have our right, as they have, to bring to fore our part of the story, our part of the truth. And reconciliation, true reconciliation in its true form, can only happen after that, when you deal with the pain and trauma.
Yes. Keep waiting, Mike.
Thank you very much, Ashley, and thank you very much, Rahul, for highlighting the pain and sufferings we understand exactly. This is certainly one component, one segment of a bigger problem. Where I was really concerned, even though our friend had been highlighting this issue before also earlier, why those people singled out this small group, even though they were not responsible for anything that is happening in Kashmir. And then on the other hand, overall, it's the Indians who take care of that part, and they have large number of army there too. Even why they are not willing to address this issue or resolve this issue, because you have been dislodged. And I personally think that people of the entire region now really are drained. They are suffering from fatigue on one angle, that they all really want peaceful and a better future for their children.
Right.
Can you come up with something that can resolve this issue in a better, looking at a better picture, so that the people of the future should not blame the present generation for not resolving such issues, which will even keep them in turmoil, upheaval, and in pain. And I think Ashley has such a good command of these issues. I'll direct him also part of this question. What is, after all, a dignified, compromised, and a pragmatic solution of this issue, that everybody comes out as a winner?
Well, I think I made it pretty clear. I think that enough has been written on about the big picture. You know, Pakistan, India, the legacy of partition, the hostilities of the Cold War, the arms coming from Afghanistan that were earlier used against Soviet Russia, and Pakistan's designs over Kashmir for many years. And the events of 1989-90, when it became very clear to us a little later that the cleansing, ethnic cleansing of Kashmiri Pandits was a part of the larger game plan to drive the minorities out. So that much is, but you know, my aim was to tell a personal memoir. It's a memoir technically of what me and my family went through in Kashmir in the turbulent 80s and after and post-Exodus. So sometimes I think it's also important for us to look at the smaller picture rather than the bigger picture, which is all, you know, which has been talked about which has been written about for so many years. As far as solution is concerned, I think you know, I wish I had all the answers. I don't have a solution as to what should be done in Kashmir. But one thing, like I mentioned in my talk also, the international community must really understand now that it is not only about Kashmir now, it is about the entire world now. Any responsible government, any democratic government which has any stake in freedom must take cognizance of you know, events in Kashmir, because this is how the cancer spreads really. You know, there's a small patch of cancer here, there's a small patch of cancer there, and before you you know, before you even look away, that cancer has grown so much that it will ultimately reach you and devour you one day. So that is my one lesson which I think should be drawn from the tragedy of Kashmiri Pandits, or from Kashmir itself.
Yes.
I happen to be one Kashmiri Pandit who lives in this country for the last 20 years. As a student I came here. I just thought I wanted to have, the way I hear all my friends and colleagues here, it seems to me that there seems to be a lot of confusion in the whole issue which we discussed. We all know there's a problem with Kashmir or Jammu Kashmir with India. We know Pakistan's involved. We know about occupied Kashmir. We know there are political issues involved. But that's not what we are talking about. Just like in America, you could have political issues, a Republican Party, a Democrat Party may not like a president, may not like some governor, they may have issues. But that does not justify anybody to go around to their own neighbors, rape their women, do ethnic cleansing in that place, and throw out an entire community fundamentally because of one reason. The reason is that you are not Muslim. You are non-Muslim, you are Hindu. If you ask beyond all these political niceties and being politically correct, the bottom line is that the Kashmir issue has been hijacked from being purely a political issue between government of India, Kashmir and Pakistan. It has been hijacked by radical Islam. Whereas the fundamental problem with Hindus or Kashmiri Pandits, as Rahul was talking about, is that they are the victim of that radicalization just taking place. So when we talk about how can we solve the Kashmir issue, how can we solve the Pakistan issue, yes, those are legit questions. But that's not what we're talking about here. We are talking about here, I'm sure in this country, people will be enraged if any community would say, I have a problem with the government, I don't like certain president, how now it gives me all the right to go around and basically target any community who happens to be a different religion, and that's justified. And in order for you to address the bigger problem, never mind what I did. So what we are really talking about is that while the larger problem will always have, there are always legitimate reasons to do it. And obviously there's dialogue going on, of course. We're not talking about what I guess Rahul is talking about here is, Rahul is talking about an ethnic cleansing in Kashmir, for which Kashmiri Hindus became victims, for the only reason that they were not Muslims. Otherwise, the difference between a Kashmiri Hindu and Kashmiri Muslim is none. They happen to be from the same ethnic group. Only difference is the religion. They speak same language. They more or less eat similar food. They more or less wear similar dresses. So I guess we have got to be frank at one time. We've got to really own it. We have to own the problem. Only then it addresses. The bottom line here is that we have this radical Islam which has hijacked the Kashmir problem, for which Kashmiri Hindus became the victims. But I have a question for Rahul. And I want to know, why did this journalistic community in India, for the matter of the entire world, but I would say much more in India, why have they failed in not being able to educate the people in India and outside? As to try to differentiate between the two, that most of the times I've seen when people talk Kashmir, they say, oh, such as an army people came and they did this human rights violation, and that's all the fuss is done. Now imagine a situation where you have an ethnic group who has no arms, no means, where the majority community is targeting them day in and day out, where the government is handled by majority community. It's a Muslim government, let's face it. So the bottom line is that why has that not been really been able to bring to the forefront, so that the people in India or the rest of the world, we are still confused. You've seen from the questions and answers, people still confused, they think it must be something related to Kashmiri politics. It's not. Why has the journalist community failed in that?
It's really a tough job talking about your own fraternity, you know. Well, I guess, I dealt with some portions of it. I'll not offer any comment, but I'll give you a couple of examples. One is, of course, the fact that, there are several issues. One is that the journalistic understanding of the issue is really low. So it is a black and white situation where, one set of people, human rights excesses from the Indian state. It also makes very rosy headline, there are guns, state is doing it, and so you have this sense of romanticism and you file those stories. Rest of it is supplementary, so that can be taken care of. The other problem is this, in India, unfortunately, and I'm sure it is true of other countries also, it is somehow fashionable to talk about certain things. It is not. It has something got to do with this sense of this left liberalism we have. I tell you from my own experience. Before this book, I wrote another book, which is a book called Hello Basta, because I've done a lot of reporting from the Maoist insurgency. So it is really the untold story of India's Maoist movement, where I've traveled through the jungles of Central and East India and spoken about, what are the issues that has led to the Maoist movement gaining so much strength. And now this book is hailed by the left intelligentsia, including significant portions of media. In Jawaharlal Nehru University, for example, in Delhi, which is a left-leaning university, I'm told that book is like a Bible. So it is, that book is in every room. So when I wrote that book, I was welcomed by these 40, 50 men and women who think they run the intellectual discourse of this country. And that includes many prominent journalists as well. But the moment you talk about Kashmir or what happened to Kashmiri Pandit, then somehow it becomes, unfashionable. So I think, that is what I've understood of this all these years.
Ashok Raina. I have been past president of the Kashmiri Overseas Association here. Back in 89, 90, when the Carnegie started in Kashmir, we started a group here which basically was charged with the responsibility of creating an awareness among US lawmakers, senators, congressmen, and the press too. But my finding has been that it's the government of India which is largely responsible for doing anything, if at all, and not to depend wholly and entirely on foreign countries. The second thing is that unfortunately, when people are displaced from a place and they go to, like in case of Jews from Germany, they go to another country and they're called refugees. In our case, they all landed up in other states within India. So they're never designated as refugees. And in fact, they've been called migrants, which is very incorrect, because that's voluntary movement and they would eventually go back on their own. The third thing is that our culture, our heritage is completely gone, because we've lost that focus, the center where we used to go and rejuvenate the Kashmiri. And for that, a place is absolutely essential. And I was there after 23 years. We went there just this year, earlier. And my feeling was that you're welcome, you can come and visit Kashmir anytime as tourists. Spend all of the money you have, but do not ever think of settling back here. Thank you.
Well, yes, that is true, and that's been our experience all these months. And something I've really noticed, that when you visit Kashmir and as a Kashmiri Pandit, and you meet your old friends, neighbors who will welcome you. But some, I don't think they do it deliberately, but it's something which is in their subconscious. The first or maybe the second question they always ask is, till when are you here? So as long as you're right. So as long as you are going there, spending money on houseboats and cabs and hotels and buying nice dry fruits and carpets, and then you're being dropped at the Kashmir airport and careful, farewell, etc. You'll be fine. Absolutely, no problem at all. But the moment you say, oh, I think I'll buy a piece of land here, or my father used to work here as a state government employee, and I think I'm exploring the option of returning back. All right, goodbye, see you. So that is an experience we always have in Kashmir, all of us.
Chidu Rajgata, Times of India.
Hi.
Hi. Rahul, can you give us a sense of, are there any Pandits remaining in the valley? How many? Are there Pandits who never left? Are there Pandits who have managed to go back and resettle? And on the ground level, what happens if you take legal recourse to reclaim your property? How do the courts treat you? And also explain the role of the political parties, national conference. How do they treat you? However small the minority is, do they constitute some kind of political influence in the current system?
Hi, pleasure to meet you finally. Well, yes, after October 1990, a few hundred families did stay back, and that spread all over Kashmir Valley in small clusters. And these are the people who faced some of these massacres which I mentioned, 1997, 1998, 2003. But what has happened now is that I think the separatist leadership in Kashmir has understood that this small cluster of Kashmiri Pandits who are not of any significance, and they're very small, less, about 2,000 people in all who never left. They are exhibited as showpieces every time, So we have this major ancient festival in the month of June, where thousands of us still travel to this village in central Kashmir to a shrine. And every June, if you notice, some of these former terrorists and separatist leaders will come and forcibly hug you, in front of the cameras to show, and then they'll make the same statements every year. Kashmir is incomplete without you, etc., etc. But apart from that, so they are living there somehow in small clusters. They are always living in fear that something will happen tomorrow, and maybe there will be another Vandhama, Sangrampura, or Nadimar, the massacres. But apart from that, in 2008, Mr. Manmohan Singh announced a so-called special deal for the return of the Kashmiri Pandit, and he said that the Kashmiri Pandit youth are most welcome to go back and join government jobs there. So he announced 6,000 jobs, out of which 1,416 were filled. And young men and women traveled to Kashmir Valley for the first time. Some of them were born after 98, so they have no idea of life in Kashmir. So these 1,416 men and women were put in 5 designated security camps spread across Kashmir Valley. But you see, in their case, security is last of their concern. What they're facing, their main concern is the kind of discrimination and harassment they are facing at the hands of their colleagues in various government offices and in schools where they work. I've met some of them during the research of this book, and some of them are living in such extreme trauma that a few of them have to be hospitalized because they faced such kind of harassment at the hands of their neighbors. But they are still living by their hoping that one day the government will have enough wisdom to transfer them elsewhere, their jobs elsewhere. They are waiting for these opportunities. And some of them do come from really poor families who really need that government jobs, and they are living on that 5,000 rupee dole, which is given by the government per month per family. So that is one aspect. But as far as the mainstream political parties in Kashmir are concerned, I don't see any difference between PDP or a national conference or the Congress party for that matter, or even the BJP for that matter in Kashmir. In Kashmir Valley, the BJP is insignificant. But they make the same noises as their counterparts in separatist groups make. Kashmir Valley is incomplete. We will make sure that the Pandits are our brothers and sisters, will return, but on ground, absolutely nothing. But it is also, they cannot do anything on their own. It also has to come from the Indian government, which has absolutely failed so far in doing anything about this.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Scott Narayana from Maryland. I'm sure you'll hear some sentiments in my voice, but rather we're grateful we're connected to as I was reading it through the streets, I was walking through it, and I personally faced the tragedy. Not here to ask a question, but to make a comment to the fellow audience members. I think as Kashmiri Pandits, we're not trying to find a political solution. What we are trying to do, I personally am, to get recognized out there. It really hurts when there are people making a comment saying, oh, Kashmiri Pandits used to live in Kashmir, we belong there. And somebody saying the denial fact that you said that we didn't do anything, but the matter of fact is we were forced out of the houses. That's what I want to bring to the audience, to everybody. That is it. We belong to Kashmir. We were part and parcel of Kashmir, and just somebody not recognizing that does not change the fact.
Well, thank you.
Yes, Steve Cohen-Brookings. Steve Cohen-Brookings. You've said a lot about the Indian government, but what about the government of the state of Jammu and Kashmir? Curious as to.
Well, I was replying to my friend. It's the same response, really. Many governments have changed in the last 23 years. There's been a Congress government. There's been another government led by the former Union Home Minister, Mr. Mufti Mohammed Saeed's party. The National Conference has been in power for many years. But as far as Kashmiri Pandits are concerned, the fundamental issues remain for us. the successive state governments have not been doing anything as far as our return or any kind of rehabilitation is concerned. I'll give you an example of, for example, of some of these, about 4,000 families who are who have been forced to live on the outskirts of the Jammu city, about 10 miles away from the Jammu city. Now these 4,000 families used to live in various refugee camps, though in the heart of the Jammu city. And now suddenly they have been forced to live in this small township. This township is about 2 years old, and you should go and see the condition of that township right now. The buildings look roughly 30 years old because there has been massive corruption in building those in the building of that township. As a result, what has happened? These 4,000 families, 16,000 people, have been entirely cut off from the rest of the community. So young boys and girls who have to attend schools or colleges or lectures are forced to return to Jammu city every day, and it's a long haul. After 8 p.m. there is no bus from the main city to this township, and sometimes they'll have to call their male members to escort them back. So there's a lot of discrimination they face. There are some families who had started small-time businesses where they stayed in the former refugee camps, a small provision store, a small departmental store, but all those businesses are gone now because they've been pushed out of the Jammu city. The township faces a daily power outage of about 16 hours. In peak summers, 16-hour power shortage. There's absolutely no facility for water supply. Small hospital was scheduled to be built there. It's been, the construction is on for many years. It is primarily working as a primary health center where you have some really basic medicines, etc. You have these families who are living under this, the government of India has this really ridiculous definition about below poverty line led by the Planning Commission, which is ridiculous in other parts of India. But the kind of dole some of these families are getting is even more ridiculous than the Planning Commission's definition of below poverty line. So some of us are really going through harrowing experience. And these successive state governments are responsible for this. And let's be also clear that the money spent on this has not come from the state expenditure. This the state government has demanded from the central government under the Prime Minister's package. Even that has been, large portions of that money have also been siphoned off. So there's absolutely no answerability for Kashmiri Pandits.
It's way past 4:30 right now, so I have to formally adjourn this meeting, but I would be delighted if you choose to stay behind and continue to talk to Rahul. We also have copies of his books out there, so if you want to contribute to his income, you're welcome to do so. He'd be happy to sign copies for you. But I need to end this meeting in a formal sense. I want to thank all of you for coming here this afternoon.
Yeah.